You are all weirdos.
Weird science is the revolution. Weird science is the revolution.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the DC Comics preview show. These are going to be comics obviously coming out this week from DC on Tuesday, which if I look at my calendar should be the 13th, is what I'm saying that it must be. And before we get into this is just going to be me, myself, and I, my three least favorite people this week, only because my man Gabe, he kind of is down and out with the idea that we no longer have the review copies. Is basically what I'm trying to get out. And the only thing that really that affects is that I won't be spoiling anything in these previews. It's kind of a shame. I ended up having a video, and I think that a lot of people may have already saw that video if you're here watching this live stream. But all in all, it doesn't really affect us. And really, I say that Gabe is a little depressed. He really isn't. I think that he was under the assumption that I had pretty much ditched this whole deal and had ditched the preview show and things like that, which obviously I have not, because here we are. So what we'll do is we'll just keep going through the previews each week, and we'll discuss, the things going on. I'll read you the solicits, and I'll give you a little information about what I'm looking forward to with these books, and also maybe what has led into them. And then we will be a little bit more informed of what's going to be coming up this late. And maybe it even though DC seems to hate my guts, I do want people to read DC Comics, and maybe we'll find some things that we all enjoy and we can all get behind, maybe, because it's a weird thing. And just, I don't want to harp on this idea of these review copies, but it is that whole crazy deal of why are they doing this and what's going on and how I would react to it. And, a gut reaction really would be, screw them, the hell with DC Comics. Either get a little bit vindictive and say, I'm going to, try to bring them down. I don't want that. And I end up defending DC, at least some of their books, because there are some good books coming out. And there's always going to be something for somebody. But I do end up talking to a lot of people who have ditched DC completely and are never, ever going to come back, whether I say, hey, this is great or this stinks or whatever. But I'm not here to, bring down DC. I love DC. I just don't like the people that run the company. They're schmucks, but I still like all of DC. So we're going to start off, and we're going to start off with a couple books that I haven't actually even been reading or reviewing. And we'll start off with one, I don't know. It's something because everything seems to be coming up Amanda Waller at the moment. And so with all of that, hey, here we go. We have a Waller versus Wildstorm book 2 because it's fancy, right? I'm not reading it. It's a Black Label thing. And usually for our podcast, we try to really focus on the in-continuity things. We have done some Black Label stuff, but it's really Black Label stuff that interests me or Eric, who we end up doing the DC Comics podcast, and neither of us are big Wildstorm fans. So the idea of Waller versus Wildstorm, it's not something that would really tickle my fancy, but I'd like to know if people are reading it, if they like it. And I want to give a shout out to everybody in the live stream. And Lane was asking about the Doc doing Steelworks and all that. I don't know if he's going to. I actually asked him and he didn't even respond. So I think that he's ditched it. But all in all, with all this, maybe we can get him to do, Wildstorm versus Amanda Waller. He's a huge Wildstorm fan. So that would be the thing. And even going into that, this Waller versus Wildstorm, because everything's coming up Waller. And then in a side note, coming up Peacemaker as well, which is odd. I'm not real learned in the whole Wildstorm deal. I end up not being very smart when it comes to Wildstorm. And I don't know that a Black Label book, Waller versus Wildstorm, is going to be my jumping on point. And then when we get to the next book, I really never would count on a Matthew Rosenberg being my jumping on point to anything. Usually a jumping off point is what I would say. But we have Waller versus Wildstorm number 2. And if you are interested, all the power to you. It's a $6 book, which is crazy. It's written by Spencer Ackerman and Evan Narcisse. I always say his name wrong, and art by Jesus Merino. I do like Jesus Merino's art, but it says the island nation of Gamorra is eager for American investment and even more eager for American metahuman weapons. Commander Waller has just what they want, the Cybernary system. But the blood that her mercenary spilled to get it has put her directly in Jackson King's sights. So now he's in the sights of the deadly Deathstroke. And I read that and I have no idea what I just said. Because again, I'm not real big on the whole Wildstorm and Waller stuff. But if you are, I wanted to point that out. It is coming out this week. And I do see in the comments that Lane is talking about the idea of the whole Birds of Prey coming out, Kelly Thompson. I'm actually going to do a video of that this week, just discussing what I think of that team and the whole Kelly Thompson in general. But we will go to the next solicit. And the next solicit, again, I said that one of the things going down, I'm not a huge Matthew Rosenberg fan. If you ended up listening to this week's podcast, I got a little, over the top mean at one point. I'll admit that I wasn't in a very good mood when we ended up recording because of all this stuff going down with DC. But in the meantime, I'm never really in a good mood when I have to deal with a Matthew Rosenberg book. And we're going to go to the next solicit, which is his Wildcats. It's Wildcats number 8. Now, I said that these first couple I haven't read. That's not true with Wildcats. I read the first 2 issues. I was pretty confused. I started reading the 3rd issue, and I usually try to give things 3 issues. And when I was reading the 3rd issue, I had that, classic epiphany that a lot of people end up having when they're reading something that they detest. What the hell am I doing reading this? Is basically what I said. And I'm sitting there reading, and usually when I end up reading, I read it like I'm a little schoolgirl back in the day. Right? Instead of talking on the phone to all the gossip, I'm reading my comics on my tablet, but I am kicking my feet around when I'm reading them. I'm laying there in the bed kicking my feet. And my wife is usually doing things that she says are more, mature, like watching really what she ends up doing. It's kind of funny. She says it's more mature for her to watch Tay-Tay videos. She's there with her Taylor Swift. And in the middle, I'm reading comics and I struggle with my whole attention span. I'm sitting there trying to get things. A lot of times I have to put on headphones and put white noise on, which I joke and tell her that that's just more Taylor Swift songs. But I end up where, and she, get this. Tay-Tay was in concert. It started raining and her piano malfunctioned. And I'm like, something's going to malfunction in a minute. And it's not going to be Tay-Tay's piano. So stop it. But I end up where I'm sitting there reading and I'm kicking my feet. I'm having a good old time. And then I realized, why am I reading this nonsense? I don't even know what's going on. When you end up reading an issue and by the end, you're just, what did I read? And you have to go back and read that. It's one thing to read a page and go, oh man, I drift off for an entire issue. It's so crazy with that, but I end up where I'm not a huge fan. So let's just decide. Wildcats number 8, though. If you are a big fan, all the power to you. Written by Matthew Rosenberg, sus. Art by Steven Segovia, not sus, pretty good artist. And usually when we do these things, even when we do the regular podcast, it's almost a given that any book without Riley Rossimo has pretty good art, right? I mean, pretty good. But yeah, even people like him. But the art has not been a problem at DC or, around most of the things for a while now. It is just pretty much the writing that has been really bad. But Wildcats number 8, $3.99. The world is dying. Grifter may just be our last hope, but things aren't looking too good for him either. Luckily, his trusty teammates will stand by his side until the end. Meet the new Wildcats. And I actually asked Doc about this because, again, Doc is a Wildcats fan, and I wanted him to let me know what he thought of a team that is Wildcats, branded Wildcats, of Green Arrow, Robin, Savant, Scarecrow, Maul, and Midnighter. And I think that he would probably say, well, okay, Savant, Maul, yeah, Midnighter, okay, but Green Arrow, Robin, and Scarecrow? And that to me is desperation time. The idea of, oh my God, we better get some eyes on this, and nobody's really going with the full team. So let's kind of finagle stuff going on. And Cotton Buds ended up in the comments there. I might try to read the first issue of Waller versus Wildstorm as well, but they're saying that they're not even bothering with the second. And again, there's going to be enough Amanda Waller. There already is. Amanda Waller, you can't escape her in the dawn of DC. And I do think it's all going to lead up to some sort of crossover event when we get down to it with her and Peacemaker for some reason working together. I want to know why the hell or what she's still doing on Earth 3 from that stupid War of Earth 3 when she went off to take, pretty much the crime syndicate as her own and take over the world. And I want to know, is that being affected by Ultraman getting killed in the John Kent Superman book as well? Because I don't think anybody's talking to each other in any of these books overall. But I may, and I'll even tell you, with some of these things, and even a couple books that I'm going to talk about by the end, a lot of them to me are, all right, I'll wait until they hit the app. I'll wait until, trade weight and things like that. And I do think that with a price tag of $6 for that Waller versus Wildstorm, that's a little too steep for me. I'm not a Rockefeller. I'm not out there throwing money and lighting cigars with hundreds. I don't have a lot of money. So that's a stiff order right there. But even this Wildcats, it's one of those things too, even when the New 52 was going on and we started our site and the podcast, I ended up kind of going towards what would be like more fringe titles, like a Stormwatch back in the New 52, because I always want to get on what I consider the cutting edge. And also when people aren't liking a book, I always think that I'm going to crack the code. Like I'm telling you, I say to Erica, we did the DC Comics podcast with, I'm like, all right, it's time for me to check out this old Stormwatch and convince everybody how it's, and then I can't convince anybody, including myself, because it ends up not being so great. But with all that, the Wildcats thing, I don't know. A couple people I talked to, they're enjoying it, but nobody's ever said to me, oh man, you need to read this, or this is the greatest thing ever. And it's Matthew Rosenberg. So with me, that is definitely one of the red flags that come up in a lot of things going on here. But we're going to move on to books that I am actually reading and talking about, and will be on the podcast this week. And I will even be reviewing these on YouTube here and also on our podcast. So we'll start with one that I do think should get, it deserves a little more of, people, a little more look-see from some people, because I think it's actually pretty good. It's just that other people, I don't know, they seem to not like it as much. And I'm desperately, as I'm saying this, I am desperately trying to load up these previews and struggling. So you'll have to forgive me as I tell you that what I am talking about here is Batman Incorporated. There is. And of course I hit, and it's a variant cover that looks crazy. But hey, I laughed too when I saw that, and I end up seeing Ghostmaker. I'm like, what's Valmont doing over here from they look very similar. But this next book is a book that I do think that people should be checking out. And it's Batman Incorporated, number 9, written by Ed Brisson, art by John Timms, cover price of $3.99. And sales haven't been great with it. I'm worried that it will end up getting canceled sometime, October. So I'd have to really check. Wherever a trade would end would probably be where I would think that it would end up being canceled. And I actually think that it's a good book that started off on the wrong foot. You ended up where Ed Brisson was adding like a plethora times 10 of characters. It was really hard to keep track, especially when he was introducing some characters that maybe some people know from classic Batman Incorporated, but also changing things up with newer characters and even brand new ones, and then being led by Ghostmaker, who's mentoring Clown Hunter. All this stuff really got wrapped up in a lot of nonsense that really shouldn't have been. It really was a convoluted start, and I really, really want people to know that it's actually gotten a lot better. It's calmed down, and what you have now, even though you are adding such classic characters of the Joker Incorporated, like my favorite, Dusty Bronco, that really does sound like some down-home porn name to me, but I'm down with that. the idea of it being personal and having the story, I think it's pretty cool. Plus, I have made the prediction that maybe, just maybe, wingman on the team is actually Bruce in disguise, keeping an eye on everybody. And if I'm right, I'll be very, very excited about that. And I want to say hi to Dwayne, who ended up joining the live chat. Thanks for showing up here. And yeah, this whole Batman Incorporated, I do think that it has become more of a quality book. It's a solid book. It's one of those books that every time we go to talk about it on the podcast, I at least know I'm not going to, it's not going to drive me nuts. I'm going to enjoy it enough. And I end up where this coming up week, and I didn't even mention at the beginning, not a lot of books coming out this week from DC. I mean, I'm talking like you're going to be shocked when I end up saying that's it, because there is not a lot. So when we do have that, and it's usually a week when Batman Incorporated does come out. It seems like a light week every time that book does come out, but at least I have that to look forward to. And there's some others as well as we go. But here's the solicit for this upcoming issue. Joker Incorporated has unleashed a game of terror across the globe. Thousands of lives are at stake as Joker, the Tap Dance Man, Corvus Call, the Ghoul, Alpaca, Dusty Bronco, and Die Laughing. That's a pretty good name. I don't know about Tap Dance Man. I actually mentioned this the last issue on our podcast. The idea that you're like, oh no, the Tap Dance Man is, you're like, really? Like the tap dance, what does he have? His, the Blue Man Group going to come in too? What are we going to do here? What is this, the Cirque du Soleil? Like, really? And then you get Dusty Bronco. Oh crap, it's gotten porno up in here. So I actually, I laugh at these names though. But the Tap Dance Man, somebody's got to, rebrand that guy. They roll out their twisted plan of chaos and mayhem in order to defeat Joker Incorporated. Batman Incorporated may have to cross the line the group promised never to cross. And yeah, you end up having a lot of this being very personal. One of the things that I really am getting a kick out of is you got Beiji, the Batman of China that was in the new Superman book by Jean Luen Yang. I like that character, and his sister is Alpaca, the Joker of that whole China deal. And that's obviously, it's very personal. And so when you have a bunch of the other characters want to go for blood, oh my God, we're going to end up killing all these Jokers. You have that twist where Beiji is not going to want that to happen to a sister. Yeah, she's a Joker, she's sus, all that, but he's not going to want his sister to die. So I'm looking forward to that. But really what I've enjoyed in it, since we got past that first arc, like I said, that first arc was way too crowded. It was very much the, let's show the mentors, the stuff that even came out of the Batman, I guess it was Batman the Night, the Chip Zdarsky deal that showed some of the background of Ghostmaker and Bruce, and you kind of tie it, and that's cool to have that synergy, but I think that it was overcrowded. I think maybe that could have been better served as like a third arc of the book and start maybe with just, some missions and teach people the characters and show people, because we're getting that now. And I think it's a lot better since we ended up going with that. So if you haven't checked that out, and even if you can check it out in the app, I would suggest to, kind of plow through the first bunch of issues, get to the second arc. And I think that a lot of people would enjoy it, because I'm telling you, I really think that it is a quality book and deserves it. It's not selling. Every time these sales, and it's weird, the sales that are coming out, they're not really the greatest. You can't really trust a lot of the numbers. It's a very small sample size. It is actually the point of sale. So whatever is reported, it's actually being sold. But I think then, and when you think about it, if we go through the whole deal with these sales, if you think about it, well, if they end up doing it with that system and they do have point of sale numbers, well, why aren't they releasing the numbers themselves? Why aren't they going to give us numbers? And I think it's because it's such a small sample size that if they showed the numbers, they would just be silly. I think that that's the point. But it gives you whatever. We don't have a lot of ways to check those things out. So at least it does give us that. But with that, Batman Incorporated, it's not doing well at all, according to those. So that does have me very, very worried. And Tevye just joined in and said, yeah, the sales numbers are very confusing. But at least it gives you that little picture and stuff. But where I realize that they're sus and don't mean anything, I haven't really seen any of the big two use those numbers or at least the rankings, because you don't get numbers, to use those rankings as a, hey, look at us, number one, baby, because I think that if they did that, say it was Zeb Wells and Spider-Man, hey, we're number one. I think that then it might be revealed, well, that's not the real numbers and this is that. So they kind of just let them lie and we go with that. But yeah, you end up MRSB. I think that the numbers for Batman Incorporated actually went up a bit, but still around like the 120 mark. Not really good. But at one point, I think it was like 160. Which is not good at all, especially a book that at least has the Batman name on the cover, not having him in unless I'm right. And he's wingman. But we'll go to the next book, the book that I'm looking the most forward to. And it's funny, if you think that it's like Spirit World, you're wrong. But I am looking forward to that. We'll get to that in a second. But it's Green Lantern. Number 2, the one that I'm looking forward to the most, mainly because it is Jeremy Adams writing the main story. And it is written by Jeremy Adams with Philip Kennedy Johnson on the backup, the John Stewart story. We have the Arts Monaco on the main deal, and then Montos, which I swear to God, I always think, oh, is that group Sammy Hagar was in back in the day? It wasn't. That was Montrose, but still makes me giggle. Cover price of $4.99. I did really like the first issue. A lot of people kind of pish-poshed it with it being a bit of a, hey, not much happened. It's a little generic. But I think that that's a good play, doing things like that for Dawn of DC. It's not a reboot, but you want to get people back on. You want to get new readers. I think that that is a good play to at least give people at a number 1 a good spot to jump on. And it did. You end up giving the rules, the whole play of no Green Lanterns allowed on Earth. You ended up having the whole planet. What is it? The Federation of Planets ended up, they're controlling the Green Lantern Corps with the Guardians gone. And Hal said, screw that. He ended up giving up his ring. I did think that it was a little confusing in the first issue. Some people were debating the idea because when Hal ends up trying to stop the guy who ends up having that Manhunter tech and blast him with pretty much the green light, you do end up having Hal's willpower form his own ring again. He's able to do that. Boom. But I want to know how that ends up being recharged. Does it need charge? What's the limits of that and things like that? Because that's a question for everybody, I think. But most people, I think, were down with it, especially because Jeremy Adams, he got shafted. He should not have been kicked off of the Flash book. And seriously, when I read that Cy Spurrier story in that Flash 800, I wanted to jump out a window because I thought I had gone completely insane. The thing is, and I said it when I was a kid, somehow my mom came up with this thing, and I don't know if anybody's ever heard about it, but the idea that if you can draw a perfect circle, it meant that you were insane. Only an insane person can draw a perfect circle. So I end up reading that Cy Spurrier deal. I'm like, oh crap, I'm drawing perfect circles. He has warped my brain. He's mind freaked me like Chris Angel, and I just wanted to jump out the window. It was just ridiculous, but we'll see how it is once we get to that Cy Spurrier run in September. What has me really worried, though, is it looks like he wants to try to kind of make the family not the thing, but also make it like, oh my God, Linda, she doesn't like me anymore 3 days after having a baby, and we've never had a problem in this whole time. Oh my goodness, what has happened? It's like here at my house. I'm telling you, my wife will start yelling at me and say she hates me. That's just every Tuesday here. But for Wally and Linda, that shouldn't be the case. But here is Green Lantern number 2. As I said, Jeremy Adams and Philip Kennedy Johnson writing. Art by Zermanico Montos. It's $4.99. Hal Jordan's homecoming is off to a rocky start. Carol Ferris is this close to firing him from the job. He's only just begged his way into. He wasn't good at flying them drones. He thought this was more Top Gun, right, than playing with toys. He wanted to play some volleyball. His power ring isn't exactly working right. Okay. And off in the shadow, Sinestro, the architect of Hal's current crisis. And that's, again, you're throwing a lot into this that I don't know that we're supposed to know yet, but his current crisis, huh? It just looked to me like Sinestro was hanging out getting drunk. He's just in the bar, kicking back. I thought that he was there to be like, hey, we got to get together because this, planet deal, they're sus, is waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Plus the hard-hitting John Stewart, Word Journal backup series from writer Philip Kennedy Johnson and artist Montos heats up as the Guardian John Stewart and his team, the Watchtower, fall under siege from a mysterious new threat. Now, the big play with this backup is that it was coming out of some of the Dark Crisis stuff. It was tying into some of the World Without a Justice League nonsense. And I will tell you right now that I just want to stop a second, common sense. I said the same exact thing, that if you were going to have Cy Spurrier, just let him do Barry. Just have him do Barry, and then just keep, what I think is, you keep Wally. People keep, well, what's Wally doing? What you just say he's having a good time with his family. And then out of nowhere, you end up slipping in the idea, oh, by the way, we're announcing a new book, Flash Fest's Man Alive. It's Wally West, and it's done by Jeremy Adams again. Boom. Everybody's happy, right? That's what I think we should have. But with all this in Convergence 2.0, Mark McGrath said, it's funny we were mentioning Telos and Convergence this week on this week's podcast about the whole play with the Injustice world. And it did make me laugh that in Convergence, when you had the Injustice world show up on that whole Convergence deal, they were the ones that were like, hey, show us what you got. No, we're not playing your game. They just got destroyed then. It made me giggle. And it was like the idea, oh, well, there goes the Injustice world. We'll never see that again, right? Yes, we will. But you end up having all this. And Tevye was talking about not connecting in with the Titans. When we had that first issue of the Titans by Tom Taylor, and you have that, oh, my God, Wally's dead. That nonsense. I actually went back and read it, and I think 100% Wally's not dead. Here's my prediction to everybody here. We'll talk about this on the, I guess, next week's preview show as well, because we'll be previewing Titans #2. I believe it comes out in a couple weeks. The idea that I do think that, and everybody can bear with me, and maybe some people have thought this as well, but I think that what we saw, Wally being killed, that was a future Wally, probably a couple weeks ahead of time. That's why he jumped on the cosmic treadmill, and then he went back a couple weeks to the present, ended up dying in a way that he's pointing towards the, hey, you got to solve my murder before it happens. And I guarantee you it will be solved by Wally and the Titans. I think that Wally's fully alive in the present. We'll see if it happens. I reread it because me and a guy were arguing. And when I reread it, I'm sitting there, I'm like, yeah, I think that this might be in the near future that he dies and comes back. So, we'll see if I am right. And you have Lane, please don't bring up that Leah Williams Power Girl. I don't need that at all. And just to go back to the idea of losing the review copies and the idea that it was funny where you end up having DC do all this. And then in this email they sent me saying, it's a real shame you're not going to be able to review the books anymore. But hey, keep talking to your friends about it. I'm like, oh, I'll keep talking to my friends. But I'm certainly going to be reviewing it. And in my mind, before that, I probably wouldn't have even touched that. I would have read it and we talk about it on the podcast, but I don't think I would have reviewed something like that Power Girl or even the Fire and Ice book when it comes out. Now I will. Now I'm determined to review everything, whether I hate it, love it, whatever. Just go full out honesty. I'm not going to try to, do nonsense undercover, all that. But I'm now inspired to review every single book like I used to. At one point, I would review everything I used to do on our site. I have over 3,000 written reviews, not to toot my own horn or anything, but written reviews. I do have a lot. And I used to do up to 10, 15 a week. And then I got lazy because, who wants to do work? But I think that I'm going to start doing that. I think that they lit a fire about that. So I will be reviewing things like that Power Girl, even though normally I probably would have tried to not do that. But back to what we're talking about here, the Green Lantern and all this going on. I'm excited. I did like that first issue by Jeremy Adams. The Philip Kennedy Johnson stuff I really wanted to get into. And it's like the funny thing where I'm reading this, I really do like what's going on in Action Comics. I think that Action Comics, that story, the Young John story by Dan Jurgens are solid gold, and everybody should check that out. The third story to me, that's bonus coverage, right? It doesn't have to be great, right? And it hasn't been, especially like the Leah Williams stuff was complete garbage. But even the stuff that we have by Dorado Quick that he's doing the Steel, it feels redundant now that we're actually getting Michael Dorn and a Steelworks book, but still, it's not horrible. It's better than Leah Williams stuff. But just imagine if that book comes and hits with all 3 stories. That is one of the strongest books going. So when I end up reading that John Stewart backup in the first issue of Green Lantern, I'm like, well, at least I like that Action Comic stuff. And, he is going to be on the Hulk over at Marvel. I haven't really liked it in that first bit, and I didn't like what it's tying into. So I'm worried about it. But maybe this is let's work the kinks out here. And then when we actually get the John Stewart solo book down the line that we were supposed to get, maybe, we'll work out all those and we'll get to that. But I'm looking forward to it. And I think that a lot of people will be grabbing. And with those sales, sus or not, it was, I believe, in the top 10, the Green Lantern deal. And I did see a mention. I'm sorry that I did not mention it at the point, but Catwoman, the sales of Catwoman have plummeted, and also the Harley Quinn have been bad as well. Teenie Howard is the kryptonite for DC Comics. She might bring it all down, and I'm worried about the whole crossover with the Gotham War with Chip Zdarsky, because I think this issue of Chip Zdarsky that came out this week, and we talked about it, me and Eric were kind of gushing about it at points on the podcast this week. I'm excited about it. Now we have to stop for Night Terrors. Then we come back and people are already having a problem getting on board with Chip Zdarsky stuff. And then you're going to throw this nonsense in and have him do Teenie Howard stuff. And I really hope that she just doesn't end up being, the anchor that takes him down underwater. I am worried about that. As Teva said, that he is worried as well about the Gotham War. I am definitely worried about the Gotham War, but I will be checking out and reviewing the Green Lantern. I will do anything to follow Jeremy Adams. And I did talk, if you did watch the video about the DC and the review copies, I did mention that a couple creators, even more, have actually come and talked to me about it. But one of the ones that freaked out right away, little, under the table talk here, it was Jeremy Adams, who said that was crap. And he said he would try to, work his magic and try to get him back. And I said, please don't get in trouble because of me. You don't need that. But, if you can do that, that'd be cool as well. Though at this point, I'm kind of like, maybe if they did offer him back, I'd tell him to go shove it. But who knows? It is nice to be able to read things ahead of time, even though, again, I am pretty lazy. So that doesn't always happen. But the next book that we'll go through here, it was a surprise. It's probably one of my biggest surprises amongst the couple books that had come out from this We Are Legends deal. I'm trying to get these up, as I said. But yeah, the whole deal is, the next book is Spirit World #2. And boy, I don't think that I've been surprised like I was with that, The Vigil, and even City Boy. I think that my rankings through this, though, are probably The Vigil #1. And I'm not a Ram V fan in the least. I really liked it. Spirit World second. And then third, City Boy. But I still did like City Boy. Plus, City Boy is very easy to end up coming up with, pretty much any sort of parody songs, because the boy is in a lot of songs. So you can do that very easily. So that tickled my fancy. But Spirit World, I was impressed with. Again, I'm not an Alyssa Wong fan. I have really gotten sick. The last issue of her Afra book, okay. But still, that book has kind of just meandered. I think her Deadpool is one of the most unfunny books I've ever read in my life. It's like reading the phone book. I can't stand it. But I did, and that Iron Fist stuff, whether or not it was the controversy of having Swordmaster, it was just boring to me. It just wasn't well written. So maybe the idea of, and it does happen, Mark Waid coming back to DC seems to have sparked him a bit. Maybe Alyssa Wong is just better over here at DC, because I think that Spirit World was really good. And where I was worried about it was because the kind of prelude deal, the start was in the Lazarus Planet stuff. And when you ended up getting that, I thought that what Alyssa Wong was doing was one of those tropes or cliches or kind of traps that a lot of newer writers or kind of bad writers do. The only way that you can elevate your character is to get an established character and make them less. And that's how it felt she was doing with Constantine. So in that prelude, Constantine was really, really bad, right? It ended up where Constantine looked like a fool. Like it didn't feel like Constantine. And then you get the first issue and you're like, okay, well, Constantine feels good here. Constantine is helping out, but helping out in a way of, well, I guess I better help you out. And that I like the idea of characters like a Constantine, even in the vein of somebody like a Damian Wayne or even a Guy Gardner. Not like they're writing them now, a handsy rapist all the time. I don't need that. But, the idea that Guy Gardner, Damian, they're characters that may not be the nicest people until you realize they are. You realize that while they don't feel like they should be heroes, that's why they're so much of a hero, because they go against that, because they really do have hearts of gold. They just have issues that they end up having to get through. That's more like Damian and Guy Gardner. They have a lot of insecurities. Damian, even just from his height and how, Batman being there's a lot to live up to and things like that. But Guy Gardner, there are times where in the past, Guy Gardner has been such a hero. If you go back and read The Death of Superman, at one point, Doomsday is just ripping through everybody, and Guy steps in and he's going to stop Doomsday. Doomsday beats the living crap out of Guy, and Guy says, and I believe he says it, I forget the character, but he actually tells them, I can't see anything. My eyes are so swollen up, I can't even see. Point me towards this asshole so I can blast him. Like, he's not even going to give up when he can't see, because his face looked like meatloaf, and he's going to go. He's such a great character, and I love that play. But that's how I like Constantine as well. He ends up really sus, and really don't become friends with him, because you're going to end up with your soul in hell. And he'll feel bad about it, but you're still going to be in hell. This happens all the time. Because, there's a price of magic. And at the end, Constantine, the price isn't going to be him. But I love the idea where somebody was telling me, oh, man, like, I hate Constantine. He's a piece of shit. He's the worst character. He's so bad. And he did this and that and the other thing. And then I kind of let it go, and we're talking. And I said, oh, but you never actually, do you like Zatanna? Is that a character you like? Oh, man, Zatanna's great. She's so good and she's awesome. I'm like, then why does she love Constantine? Why would she, if you think she's so great, why would she get involved with Constantine? I don't know. Now she likes that sort of thing, but it's like those little things that end up where, like, okay, yeah, they are heroes. But again, I'm going away from the whole play of the idea that I did like Constantine in that first issue, because he's helping because he thinks he needs to. It's favor stuff, all that. But in the meantime, he is really trying to help. And what drew me to even getting involved with the first issue was definitely Cassandra Cain. I love Cass. I think that she's great. I don't know who the hell that Cass is in that Batgirl's book by Clunred, because Cass is one of the most capable characters, capable fighters. At one point in James Tynion's Detective Comics, Batman admitted that the one person that he is afraid of fighting would be Cass. Cass would kick his ass. And yet you go and have this Clunred deal where when they were doing interviews beforehand, they end up, oh, yeah, they're 12 and, doing their thing. And then somebody called them out on it. What are you talking about? 12? Like, no, they've been, we didn't mean that. We meant 17. No, you did mean it, because you wrote it like that. It's such a weird, ridiculous book. But you have Cass there. She is stuck in the spirit world, and that is drawing all of the dead and the spirits at her. They're going to eat her. She's getting help from friends of Xanthi, who, that's pretty cool. And then in the regular deal, we did have a crazy cliffhanger where Constantine and Xanthi, they're trying desperately to get to the spirit world. They're trying to find their path there. They end up doing the ritual, find the way. And as they're going, they are interrupted by Xanthi running straight up into their mother. And they've been dead for like 15 years. And mother's kind of shocked about it. Like, oh, my God, like, what are you doing? So that's a crazy personal deal of how much time can you spend here? Because Cass could be in real big trouble. And you have to get them out of the spirit world in a certain amount of time. So I actually like the beginning. I'm not saying that every issue is going to be great. It's going to continue to be good. But that first issue I liked. And there you go. Here's issue 2. Again, written by Alyssa Wong. Artist by Haining. Which every time I see that, I'm like, well, wasn't that a quarterback for the Dolphins back in the cover price $3.99? There's a lot of these, artists and people that I just don't know. With Cassandra Cain still stuck in the spirit world, Xanthi and Constantine are hoping the one portal they found, which is quickly closing, is their one-way ticket to the land of the dead to help rescue Batgirl. Cass has made 2 spirit friends along the way who have given her a special cloak that keeps her mask keeps her living flesh stench. Telling you, if I was in the spirit world, there'd be big troubles. They would smell me from a trillion miles away. It's very sweaty in here, is what I'm saying. I'd like to think that I shower, occasionally, but in the Philadelphia area, pretty damn hot and muggy today. But the stench would keep the other spirits from eating her. But can they be trusted? And hey, what's in this tea that they just gave her? Hopefully, it's not something that Grant Morrison would approve of, or maybe you'll end up having Cass like the next thing you know, in the spirit world, goes off and pretty much records Sergeant Pepper's out of nowhere. Like, oh my God, I'm in. But I'm looking forward to that. I think that will hopefully continue to be a good book. And we don't get a lot of that sort of thing right now. I'm hoping that eventually coming up, we'll get a Justice League Dark back, things like that, but we don't get a lot of magic books and things like that going. So I am still looking forward to all of the We Are Legends second issues. It's funny, when we talked about them on the podcast, we did mention that whole, what was it? The deal that Dan DiDio had the imprint with damaged sideways silencer. That's what it feels like to me still, but I'm into it. I am into this. And it's funny, I always know the name of those books, but now that I have We Are Legend, that's kind of pushed the other out my other ear. So there you go. We have that. But we end up going to the next book, and this is going to be the deal. These next two books, and there's only two more books. That's how little amount of books there are this week from DC. But the next two books are things that we had been covering on the podcast, but we ended up deciding the last episode that these came out that we were going to drop them, that we weren't enjoying them enough, that they were kind of a slog to get through. I'm sure that one of them people will be like, but that's such a good book. It's just, it's more of a trade weight book, but I probably will still review these two on YouTube, but we won't be talking about them on the podcast, which really makes our podcast pretty limited this week. I mean, seriously, I think we have 3 issues that we're talking about and how we do things. 2 of those issues will be on our Patreon spotlight, picked by the badasses, the Get Fresh crew. So legitimately, our podcast this week will have one book on it that has never happened before. Not even on annuals weeks has that happened. So kind of a crazy deal. But the next book, and what I'm talking about, starting with a Harley book, and it is it's Multiversity Harley Screws Up the DCU. Number 4, written by Frank Thierry, art by Logan Fairbairn, and cover price of $4.99. And I don't know about everybody else, obviously, but I am actually I'm a Harley fan. I love Harley as a character. I don't really love much of the books that we've gotten forever. And as a Harley fan, I have gone on the record a bunch of times. Even the last time we talked about this book on the podcast, I think that Harley has to kind of be put away for a little. I think that maybe you have to stop putting on Teeny Howard. Is that even, I don't even know what that is. That is just nonsense. And again, I'd rather have no book than nonsense, because that book Teeny Howard's doing is not going to sell. It's not going to convince anybody to be a Harley fan. It's going to be more people jumping off or making fun of it. And I do think that at this point, you need to have people wanting Harley to come out again. You need to put her away for a bit, so then people say, you know what I need? A Harley book. And then eventually you do come out, but come out with something that's more than just, I like that Harley being Harley. And that's one of the problems with Harley. Nobody anymore is writing her as a character. She's a caricature. And they end up where, okay, we're doing this. And it's hard to not do it, I think, if you're writing Harley, but you can't just have every page Harley being Harley. And I say Harley being Harley, that's, okay, she's going to break the fourth wall here. She's going to tell a vulgar joke there. She's going to make a pop. You never get a story then. You never end up getting a story. And Common Sense is even talking about it. And Cotton Buds is talking about Harley as a villain. What I like her as, and again, I'm a Harley fan. I don't mind her trying to be a hero. I actually think that she does very well trying to be one. I don't like it when everybody is telling me that she's a hero, or she's on the Justice League, or they consider her part of the Bat family. I like that Harley might want to be good, but she can't keep herself from doing it the wrong way. And she can't. She's always going to be her worst enemy in things like that. And that I don't mind. But if you're going to do it in a way that she's a full fleshed out character. Just because she's Harley doesn't mean every page, every panel has to have a joke, and everything has to have this, references or, fourth wall break. You don't need that, because then by the end, you realize, like, it would be like the idea if I said to you, hey, get this, we're going to get a story here. You want to see the best story ever told. And then we go see a stand-up comedian. Well, that'll be fun. But the way that that's set up, and then it's not going to give you the greatest. Now, he may tell some funny stories, or she, during the deal, but it's not going to be one of those like, oh my God, that's the craziest. You're going to get what you get. And I think that Harley could be more of that. And that's where MRSB even says, does she have any skills? And that's what I like about her. She is confident when she shouldn't be and things like that. But what she does have a skill in, because of her psychological background, and that is she can be a people person, and she can end up. And one of the things, a lot of people didn't like the Amanda Connor, Jimmy Palmiotti deal, and some of it was way over the top or whatnot, but it did have that cast of characters that kind of went around her, because, she can, and sometimes she's manipulating, but other times she is trying to help and things. But in the Suicide Squad, the deal, or Cotton Buds mentions that, I think, and I believe it was Sean Ryan's new Suicide Squad. If you haven't read that, and you can go and get a chance, I really think that was one of the most underrated books from the New 52 into the DCYOU, that whole deal, is that deal, because that's where you went and got Reverse Flash, Daniel West, which ends up being, and it was the father of Wallace West, Ace right now, and had a really good hero turn at the end, ended up dying a hero. You ended up having one of the best boomerangs I've ever seen, where again, he's sus, but he means well. And then Harley, even in that, is trying to figure out. And yeah, it started out with Dula Denton. It was weird when that run started. You ended up having like the alternates. You had Deathstroke and Deadshot, so they would go. You had Dula Dent and Harley, and you had that. So with all that, he ended up developing some things. One of the best things is that they end up, and they're in like the Middle East, and they're supposed to lay low. They're supposed to be doing things. And Boomerang finds out that the kids there aren't allowed to play. And he gets upset at that. And he knows that he shouldn't do anything direct. And he ends up and goes and starts playing soccer with them. And they end up like, everybody lost their mind because he wasn't, but he didn't like that these kids weren't able to have fun. It was really, really good. And they end up having where somebody comes up and it's like, hey, what's going on? What do you think? And he's like, hey, it's the weekend. And then they're like, what do you mean? What does that matter? It's like, we're all working towards it. And it just was fun. And it was a real nice deal. And he ended up trying to help some people. But that was, I like, a really good run. And then the idea of the Murphyverse, Mark ended up mentioning that. And I like the Murphyverse Harley as well. That's, again, though, you know why? Because I think that's a developed character. That's a character that, and you sometimes have that with characters like a Harley when you do some alt universe thing where then you have to set up something. You end up setting it up well. When you get Harley in the regular universe, they count on you. Hey, it's me, Harley. She just walks in a room and hey, you get the laugh track going. Hey, it's me. And I don't need that anymore. So yeah, I think that you should end up where Harley disappears. But here's the multiversity. Harley screws up the DCU after all that. And really, this is that play of a future Harley and our present Harley trying to undo the problems that Harley caused, maybe because there was a little bit of a wacky, it might not be her, but ended up getting rid of the Justice League. And because of that, when Starro attacked, there was no Justice League to fight off. So they're trying to reestablish through time travel and nonsense the Justice League again. And it's Harley being jokey and all that. And everything's convoluted. But here we go. How can Harley stop herself from screwing up the timeline if her future self has already screwed it all up? First, she discovered she totally stopped Superman and the Flash from ever existing. And I'm telling you, if anybody here ends up in an alternate universe where the Flash didn't exist, please don't go to him and try to throw chemicals on him and get him hit by lightning. It doesn't work. You end up killing him all the time. But now she's finding out that she totally time travel. That happened in that Flashpoint Beyond as well. It always happens. Poor Barry. Time travel right over Wonder Woman's and Aquaman's origins, too. Harley has to stop Harley, or at least to put the piece of the DCUs she's broken back together again with a time machine and a tough, scary alternate universe. Harley at her side. Maybe, just maybe, she could make things right again. The big play with all of this was that my man Eric on our DC Comics podcast, he's a big multiverse fan. If it has multiversity on it, he forces me to talk about it. Even that crappy Danny Lord nonsense that we ended up with, the young judge, that was awful. All these things never work out very well. But here we are, and we did talk about the first 3 issues. We like to give everything 3 issues, but it's not been good. So we dropped it. So we're not going to be talking about that, but I still may check it out and do a review on that. But like I said, we have one more book left. And if you're playing at home, you might know exactly the book I'm talking about. And I think that some people may end up, maybe fighting me about this book, but I have not enjoyed it to a point that I think that it's like, I don't know. It's a trade weight book for me, 100%. It is Superman Lost. And Superman Lost #4 is coming out this week. It is Christopher Priest or James Owsley. This guy has changed names more times than Prince. And art by Carlo Pagulan. I'm sure that somebody may have already mentioned as I talk about this. The art is incredible. The art is worth the price, even though I still think it is a little pricey at $4.99 for what we get. By the end of each issue, I what was this, like 15 pages? And then it was kind of standard page length, but that should be $3.99. This isn't oversized. What are you doing here? But it is Christopher Priest. It is $4.99, but it is Carlo Pagulan, and the art's really good. It's just, and the concept is great. I think that the idea, it really is very reminiscent of John being aged up, but because Superman doesn't really show that, he goes off, he gets caught in space, he comes back where it only seems like he left a little bit, but it's been years, he's trying to deal with this trauma. That's cool and all, but it's a slog to get through. I know that Priest wants to show us this trauma and show us all these things, but I'm just like, man, I do not need this. And I am one of the few, it seems, that I think, and people fight me about this all the time, I think Christopher Priest is one of the most overrated comic book writers that we've had. I really think that his Black Panther is stupendous, the best Black Panther ever. But I've also read things like his recent U.S. agent that I wouldn't wipe my ass with because I'd be afraid that that nonsense would wipe off into my ass because I thought it was that bad. That Black Adam book is nonsense. It is boring. I don't even know what's good. And the thing about this is with Priest going with this, he has gone on in interviews, and again, this drives me nuts, where they say, and this happened more with Black Panther, or not Black Panther, Black Adam, but I can say that it probably happened with this as well, the Superman Lost, where he'll go and it's like, oh yeah, I told him that I'll write this, but I ain't reading anything from the last 10 years. Don't worry about it. He's like, and they said fine, so I went with it. And I'm like, all right, so we're going to get nonsense. That's what we get, and it's never going to tie into anything. What you're going to have to do is, if you want it to be important, you have to have other writers make it work in their things to go forward than what he's doing. I just think that he's way overrated, and everything that I've read in Deathstroke, I liked to a point. By the end of once you ended up having Deathstroke versus Batman, it went downhill from there, and I will die on that hill, because anybody who's there, well, no, it was great till the end. You tell me about possible aliens and hobos and shit that was going on in that book. That thing went wacky and never really had a great resolution, and it was over. So, and I loved like the whole Deathstroke squad, the Stroke squad. That was awesome. And we ended up getting my favorite. I mean, people might get mad as well, but the Power Girl, Tanya Spears, I love her. I wish that she was around more, and Leah Williams can go to hell. Let's get the old, and they called her Powerhouse, and then you end up having Naomi being named that in the future, which pissed me off too. And that all pisses me off. But yeah, again, people like Priest, people, whatever, and that's all the power to them. When I end up reading something that I'm intrigued and want to buy each issue from, then I'll admit that I'm back on the priest trolley. I'm not right now. Everything I read is boring as shit. And this Superman Lost is boring. And by the end, it may be one of those. I usually, and I say this a lot, I usually think that that idea of, hey, it'll be better in trade, that's just code for it really sucks. And I'm just going to push it aside. But there are some books. I think Ram V is a writer that probably will end up reading better in trade for a lot of things he does. And that's legit. And I think that this, with Christopher Priest doing this book, Superman Lost, I think that it will read better in trade. So I will wait. And by the time that it's over, I'll either be reading it in the app, or if somebody ends up telling me, oh man, it really picked up in issue 6. I may sit there and like, but it's nice to pick up an issue 1, but maybe I'll get around to it. But we ended up talking about it. We didn't talk about the first issue on the podcast. Then we talked about issues 2 and 3. Nothing really happened. So we decided we were dropping it. But again, I may read this and do a review anyway. I like to sit there and act tough and say, I'm not reading this crap. I'm not going to. And then I end up doing it anyway, because that's what we do with the reviews and things like that. So it's a lot of me just blustering. Superman Lost number 4, though. Christopher Priest, Carlo Pagulain, $4.99. Can even Superman withstand being pushed past the point of emotional and psychological endurance? And it's such a good concept. The idea that here's a guy who he could stop a train, a bullet, but can he stop PTSD from being away from the people he loved for that long and going through all that? That's something that maybe not even a Superman can battle. And it definitely is something that you can't punch. That would be, my, like if they had Weird Science on the back cover, it's like Superman finally has run into a problem he can't just punch. It's great. Priest has done it again. Like that would be if I was going for a review blurb that I wanted on the trade. Pretty good, right? I think that it would work. But you end up where I don't need them just floating around in space, worrying about technicalities and science stuff that doesn't make sense in my mind. I understand that, comic book science is wacky. So don't try to make sense of it. You're really trying to make sense of something that should never be made sense of. But marooned on a comet in uncharted space, the Man of Steel reflects on his humble Smallville origins as crushing emotional fatigue threatens to end his journey back. Trauma which results in Lois's struggle to reconnect with the virtual stranger in her own home. Oh my, I don't know if anybody thought this. If you read the last issue, I swear to God that I was there and I'm like, you know what? I believe that Lois might be screwing around with the Batmans. I really got that idea, and that's where it was going. Like, oh crap, she's shacking up with Bruce Wayne. It made me giggle. I don't think that's happening, but it may. I don't know. Hey, Rocky. Rocky just ended up talking about Lee Week's art and the idea of Lost. And yeah, I think that book is garbage, but we will continue because actually that is it for all of the DC Comics deal. But as a bonus here, I don't actually have a preview of it. I do want to mention a book, and if you have heard about it, unfortunately, you may have heard spoilers, all that stuff, but it is Void Rivals, which comes out this week. Void Rivals number 1. If you like Robert Kirkman, it's coming out from Image and Skybound. And it's one of those where, unfortunately, a lot of things have been spoiled. And it sucks because the spoiler is great. And I think that a lot of people, if you haven't been spoiled, try not to find out anything about it. And do check out Void Rivals number 1 that comes out by Kirkman, and also art by Lorenzo De Felici, which is $3.99. It is the kind of like I don't know, is it the spiritual sequel to Oblivion Song? It is the same team doing that, and it's the biggest new book series of 2023, and there is a thing that happens in it. It might be damn right, and it's pretty crazy with the launch of an all-new shared universe and a surprise you won't see coming. I'm just reading the solicit here, but I did want to point it out. Eventually, I think that I'll start doing more stuff with the Marvel previews and also the indie stuff, because unlike DC, I actually end up getting review copies from every other company, but so DC, they're the, odd thing out, but still, I might end up putting some things going. And I do think if you are, see, that's the thing. I'd love to keep saying, like, man, if you love this, you should check out Void Rivals. But I'm not going to spoil things, even though it was spoiled. But you end up, and I'll even continue the solicit. It says war rages around the sacred ring where the last remnants of two worlds have collapsed around a black hole in a never-ending war. However, when pilot Derek and his rival Solila both crash on a desolate planet, almost like enemy mine, these two enemies must find a way to escape together. But are they alone in the strange planet? And what dark forces await that threaten the entire universe? And I will give Kirkman and Skybound Image a lot of credit, because you really are doing something with this issue that's going to blow a lot of people's minds, and they're going to be so fired up about it, but they're keeping it on the down low and not even counting on that right now of the sales, but it's been leaked and ruined. So it's a shame. You don't really get a lot of surprises anymore anyway. So it's really cool when you actually get that. Cool. I'll tell you, even just as a quality wise, I was surprised by those We Are Legends stuff. Spirit World, Vigil, City Boy. My bar was set real low, but I was surprised. And it made me, again, like, those are the little things that you are reminded, man, that's why I love comics. Oh, man, you can always get the shit going, and it's pretty cool. And I think that a lot of people will feel that way with Void. I really want to tell you, not even like try to spoil it, but tell you, like, if you're a fan of this, then you'll love this. You can't, I won't do it. But once it comes out, everything gets out there and whatnot. I'm just telling you that a lot of people should grab this issue without getting spoiled, so that you can end up being really excited about something there. Why did I end up doing this one at the end of a DC Comics podcast when I really don't want to spoil things? But it's a really good deal. So with all of that, there's the little wink, wink to see if you can end up figuring it out. But if you don't mind spoilers, it's out there and you can check that out all over the place and then get excited as well. But that's it. That is it for the show. Again, I kind of threw this together at the last second. I wasn't even sure that I would end up continuing the preview show. Obviously, this preview show went way off the rails because I'm by myself and I'm not medicated, and away we go. I had a coffee thinking that I was going to be able to drink my coffee while we did this, and I couldn't. So I'm going to have to heat this up, but I'll keep doing this. I'll be back next Sunday. We'll do this live each time, have a hoot with it. I hope that people enjoyed it. I hope that people end up tuning in, and kind of we'll just talk about things. And maybe as we go, I talked to Gabe at one point that we might, even if he joins me again, or maybe Rocky will join me, I don't know, we can have all this stuff. We'll have the gang's all here. Because me and Rocky we're going to end up eventually doing the Indie Comics podcast when we get the time, and that'll be cool as well. So with all of that, I think, Rocky, I'm not talking about alcohol, Rocky. Come on now. And I have a bone to pick with you being Canadian. All this nonsense air quality, I'm just blaming right to you. Is what I'm doing. So with all that, though, maybe even talk about some of the news of the week and get this to be not just a preview show, but kind of just a, hey, let's talk about comics type of thing as well. So we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. Everybody let me know what you'd like to see, what you don't want to see. And even if it's Gabe, we'll still have Sus Gabe on. Gabe, we need his sus opinions at points. It keeps everybody in line, is what I think. I mean, is there another Predator coming out? Definitely Gabe's got to do that Predator Wolverine. Holy moly. He'll give it a 15 out of 10. But that is that. I'm sure. I'm looking here. Is the Comic Boom Rocky? Now, you're just making fun of me about your air quality there. You're in a different spot, though. So I won't blame you. But with that, everybody, thanks for watching. Thanks for everything. I really do appreciate it. I'll be putting up reviews for most of the things I talked about tonight as the week goes on. I'll try to put a bunch up on Tuesday as the books come out. And then as the week goes, we'll have some Marvel stuff and things. So thanks, everybody. Also, I did mention, just as the last deal, I'll have a video up about the Birds of Prey team and Kelly Thompson, that stuff. But I also have a couple other videos that I think I might do that will be what I am looking forward to and not looking forward to, and that whole deal with Night Terrors with a K. And then also a video that I was working about of are deaths even slightly meaningful in comics anymore? The answer is no, but we'll have a video on that and maybe talk about that as well. So thanks, everybody. I really do appreciate it, and I will talk to you all later. As I sit here, again, I'm not really good with this, so let's rewind that a bit. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you all later.
You are all weirdos.
Weird science is the revolution. Weird science is the revolution.